All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today in this class, we're going to be talking about the independence of Mexico and then basically what happened between Mexico and the United States and how did the United States get basically Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada. How did they get that land? That's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to your warm-up picture. But first, let's go over the objective. We're going to analyze how Mexico got its independence. We're going to examine how the U.S. obtained all the Southwest territory from Mexico and create an argument on where Crockett's body and Bowie's knife may be. If you've never heard of those last names, you're going to today. Okay, so here's the warm-up picture. The first question asks you to analyze this picture and basically tell me what's going on here. Okay. It's pretty evident to see which side is American, which side is Mexico. Okay. The second question asks you, who do you think is going to win? All right, which side? I can tell you this right now. The background image, that city, that is not U.S. territory. Okay, so before you say, "Oh yeah, Americans going to win because they took over the American territory," that area is not United States territory. It won't be ever. But the Americans are there. We're going to get to that later on. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with the notes. But first, again, make sure you finish your warm up questions. Prepare yourself because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So here's the thing. When Spain controlled Mexico that is now the territory that is now Mexico, the Mexican people were treated very badly, very harshly by the Spaniards. The Spaniards saw themselves as above the Mexicans and things like that. Now, of all the people who were just like, we've had enough. This is enough. The person who stepped up and started something was actually a priest. His name was Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla. Okay, he was a Catholic priest, and he is the guy who launched the Mexican War for Independence on September 16th, 1810. Now I know it's one of those misconception thing where people believe that Mexico's Independence Day is the fifth Cinco de Mayo. That's not the case. It's not the 5th of May. It's actually September 16th. May 5th was a battle at the city of Pueblo where a bunch of farmers beat back some soldiers. It's just a little battle. That's all it was. Great underdog story, not the independence of Mexico. Okay. So he issued the Grito de Dolores, which is the cry of Dolores. Um, so he's attacking. He's getting people to follow him, and again, because of his status as a priest, people are following him. Not only is he stepping up and, he's a priest, but also he's showing the people, hey, you can stand up and fight back, and people do. They follow him. So Spain basically says, you know what? If we capture him and execute him, then this whole thing will go away because the Mexican people will lose their leader, and then they'll be leaderless, and then they'll go back to the way things were. So that's what Spain does. They do capture him later on, and he is killed. But instead of the Mexican people going, "Oh well, darn it, our leader's dead. I guess we'll just go home now." No, what happened is actually the reverse. It made them basically see him as a martyr and try harder to gain their independence. And eventually they did. The war finally ended September 27th, 1821, so 11 years later. So it took some time. It wasn't, a matter of like 2, 3, 4 years. No, it took some time, but eventually the Mexican people got their independence. All right, so here's your first question. Should Father Miguel Hidalgo be considered a man of the cloth? Because remember, priests are supposed to be preaching about love and peace amongst, people and things like that. But he's the one who started the war. So should he, still be considered a man of the cloth? You know, a priest of peace and things like that and love? Or should it be like, yeah, he loved the people so much that he said enough is enough, you know? What do you think? Tell me what you believe. Okay? So write your opinion down, but we're moving on. Okay? In three, two, one. So Mexico is now independent. And what happened was there were some Americans who wanted, to go into the Texas territory. They wanted to expand and stuff like that. So they asked Mexico, "Hey, can we like go into this area, settle and things like that?" And Mexico said, "Yeah, sure, come on over," because they figured, hey, they're going to bring trade, they're going to bring money, they're going to bring, they're going to be a labor force. So yeah, come on in. In fact, too, Texas is kind of, in a sense, kind of deserted. There's not many people living in Texas. So yeah, they told them though, however, you do have to sign this document. It's called the Federalist Constitution of 1824. You do have to agree to it. Here are some of the rules. Number one, you have to follow Mexican law. Pretty obvious, right? If you go to another country, you got to follow their laws. They have to stay on a specific part of land. They cannot be like going from here, going 100 miles over here, and then settling another 100 miles over here. No, they cannot do that. They're like, hey, tell us where you're gonna be at. We'll tell you if it's good, and that's where you're gonna be in that area. Excuse me. No slaves. That was a big one. No slaves. Because you have to remember, the Mexican people were treated like crap for years. So Mexico doesn't allow slavery whatsoever. Did people bring their slaves? Absolutely. But they didn't call them slaves. No, 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 no. They called them indentured servants or just servants. These are my servants. You know, they're not slaves. Oh no, that's horrible. No, no, these are servants. They're still slaves. The other thing they do, they had to pay their taxes. They had to pay their taxes to the Mexican government, and everyone had to register. They needed an account of who came, you know, here, where they settled, things like that. Um, Now, what happened is, several years later, this guy right here, the one in the picture, that's Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. He becomes the president of Mexico. Okay. Now, it's supposed to be 1835, not 1935, but in 1835, the term president isn't good enough because, presidents, their time ends. He didn't want that. So he basically says, you know what? I am going to be the emperor of Mexico. And since I am your emperor, there's no need for congressmen and representatives and things like that. So you guys can go away. I am the government. I am the emperor. Okay, so he thinks he's like in Mexican, Spanish we call it chingon. You think you're top dog. You think your head's, you get your head all big, and that's what happens. He does. While the white settlers in Texas, they didn't like this. So the Texas Revolution began, and they're basically saying, hey, when we signed the Federalist Constitution of 1824, we did it with a Mexican government, not a emperor. So basically Santa Anna goes, well, if you don't like it, leave. And they're like, no, no, I have my home here. I have my business here. I'm situated here. That sounds kind of familiar, huh? If you don't like being in this country, then get out. No, I don't want to. You know, they didn't leave, and people nowadays who said that same thing are like it's kind of in reverse now, right? See, again, history repeats itself, guys. Hopefully, you see that. But the thing is, the Americans did not leave. In fact, more came into Texas, and they did not register. They did not really pay their taxes to the Mexican government. No, they brought their slaves. They squatted around. They moved from area to area. And sometimes, majority of times, they did not follow every single Mexican law. Okay. So Santa Anna then says, basically, you know what? I'm closing the border. No, no more Americans. Why? The reason why he says, y'all don't pay their taxes. You guys don't pay your taxes. That's why I'm cutting you guys off. Still, Americans come in. There is no wall on the Mexican border, Mexican Texas border. So Americans just keep coming in, stuff like that. So what happens is this: in San Antonio, there's a place called the Alamo. It's a fort. This part of it you see on top there, that's what still stands to this day. It's a church, you know, but the thing is, it was used as a fort. The Mexican army and the American army, or I should say the Texas army, went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on taking control of the Alamo, the fort there. Thing is, when the Americans had control of it, the Santa Anna decided, you know what, this is it, enough's enough. So they went in and he took, I mean, almost their entire army there. Um, so from February 23rd to March 6th, 1836, the Mexican troops, which were about 1,500 to 2,000, surrounded the Alamo. And inside the Alamo, there were soldiers and citizens alike. If you watch like the old movies, they show them as like all the people in there are white people and things like that. And that's not true. That's not true. There were Mexican people in there. They weren't all soldiers. They were, some people were bankers, some people were shop workers, things like that. Um, Now inside there was three famous people. One was Davy Crockett. If you've ever heard the name, you might have heard the myths and the legends and things like that about him. He rode a hurricane or he rode a lightning storm too. He jumped the Mississippi River in one jump. It's like, no. But the story back then, people loved it. And the thing is, in reality, he was a frontiersman. He was one of those guys who liked going out into the wilderness and discovering, territory and stuff like that. And he liked hunting. He was actually a very good marksman. The legend has it he could shoot a fly off a horse's back from 200 yards. Could he really do it? No. But he was an excellent marksman with the gun. The next guy was Jim Bowie, or Bowie, however you want to pronounce it. He was a famous fighter with a knife. And if you see the picture of the knife on the bottom, that knife is named after him. It's called the Bowie knife. Okay. He was there. He was very sick when the battle happened, and he ended up being killed. Same thing with William B. Travis. He's a leader inside the Alamo. He gets killed. Same thing with Davy Crockett. Here's the thing: Davy Crockett's body and Bowie's knife, they're never found. They're never found. When they buried the bodies, the knife and the Crockett's body are not there. No one knows where they went. So with this battle that happened, and people inside were like, "Oh my God, these people inside, they fought so bravely," and things like that. The battle cry, "Remember the Alamo," rang throughout Texas, and men came over with Sam Houston to try and defeat um, Santa Anna. Problem was, Sam Houston is a very smart man. He knew, hey, we have so many guys, we cannot defeat the whole Mexican army. So we need to like kind of run away from them. And that's what he does. He starts running away. Santa Anna thinks, oh, he's running away. We can catch him, things like that. So the thing is, remember, they have cannons, they have heavy equipment. So as they're trying to chase them, they're getting farther and farther behind. So he's like, leave the cannons, leave all this stuff behind. Let's get them. Let's get this, Texas army. And they start chasing him. They start getting him close by. And what Santa Anna does, he makes a mistake. He takes his whole army and separates them. He said, you guys go this way, we'll go this way. When Sam Houston hears that the Santa Anna army has broken up, half of us over here, half of them over here, he knows now, hey, my troops can take on half their soldiers. We just got to catch them by surprise. And that's what happens on April 21st. Sam Houston attacks Santa Anna's group. Um, by surprise, they're not set up. They're not really ready for the Texas Army, and they win. They overrun them. Santa Anna actually tries to hide from his hide as one of his soldiers. But you have to remember, a person, an emperor, they have an ego, and they tend to have their pictures and stuff like that around. So when he was trying to hide as one of the soldiers, the Texas Army people were like, "Hey, there he is. That's him. That's Santa Anna." And they basically made him sign a treaty which transferred Texas over to the Texas soldiers. And Texas ends up being its own quote unquote nation. That's why it's known as the Lone Star State, because they were their own country for a bit. And if you've ever heard the Six Flags of Texas, that refers to the six countries that occupied that land of Texas. And there you go. So here's your next question. What do you think would have happened if Mexico didn't allow American settlers into Texas? Right at the beginning, when they were like, "Hey, can we come in here and settle and things like that?" If Mexico was to say no, no, you guys stay on your border, we're going to stay on our side. That's the way it's going to be. What do you think would happen? Do you think the U.S. would have eventually invaded Mexico? Do you think they would have tried to buy the land like in the Louisiana Purchase? Do you think people would have tried to sneak in, Um, or you think, hey, no, hey, that's your territory, this is ours, so be it, you know? What do you think? What do you think would have happened? All right. So pause the video, write your response, okay, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So now we're gonna skip up about 9 years. And President James K. Polk, yes, we had a President Polk. He is sworn in as president, and he has this belief in the manifest destiny, which is, hey, the United States should own from the land from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, all that territory the United States should own. Here's a problem: Mexico owns, um, New Mexico and Colorado and Nevada and Arizona and California. They own all that territory. So what happens is this: if let me move this um, little video thing. So if you look on the side where the video was, you'll see this thing called the Nueces River. Mexico basically said that is the border. And I don't know if you can see my cursor on your side, but it basically goes all the way up like this. So they're saying that is the border. The United States says, no, 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 that's not the border. The border is Rio Grande, which is again down here. So you can see the argument of disputed land. One side says the border over here, the other side says the border's here. That area in between, they can't agree on whose land is that. And that's where the problem comes in. Polk hears, quote unquote, he hears that the Mexican troops have crossed, you know, uh, into the across the Rio Grande and into the American soil. So he sends troops. So the troops cross the West River, and now they're in what Mexico believes is their land. So they send troops, and they see each other, they fight each other. The Mexican cavalry, which is the one guys with horses, they attack the U.S. soldiers who are on foot on April 25th, 1846. And what ends up happening is the Mexican side wins. They take the living soldiers, they take them back to Mexico, hold them captive, and basically then release them. Polk and the general for the U.S. Army at the time basically told Mexico, "You need to apologize to us for taking our soldiers." And they're like, "We're not going to apologize to you guys. It was a battle. We won. We took your guys prisoners, and now you got them back." Polk then starts shouting to the media, to the public and people, anyone who will listen. He's basically telling them, Mexico crossed the boundaries. They crossed the border. They killed American soldiers on American land. American blood has been spilt by invaders on American territory. And people are like, oh my God, oh, how dare those Mexican people, oh, how dare they, this and that. And everyone's following along and accepting what Polk is saying, except one senator. You know, one senator basically stands up and says, excuse me, Mr. President, where exactly was the battle? Where were those guys killed? Polk doesn't answer him. Polk just keeps going, shouting, don't you understand? People died. Our American soldiers died by these invaders. Excuse me, where exactly did they die? And Polk knows if he answers him, tells him, hey, he died here, that senator is going to be like, well, that's disputed land. They think they own it. We think we own it. So could you say that was an accident? You know, if the roles were reversed, what would have happened? You know, so that's the thing. The president did not answer him. He just kept quiet, and the Congress basically declares war on Mexico because of this. That senator who stepped up and said something, that is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, this is the first time that he really gets notoriety for standing up to Polk and saying, Mr. President, where exactly did this happen? You're saying all this stuff, which is okay, I get you, but where did this happen? You're not saying that. So he showed his intelligence and he showed how, hey, this doesn't seem right. So here's the thing. You have to remember the area that, let's say that area that's shaded and then that grayish, not grayish, but kind of tannish area, all that land is Mexico. They don't have enough soldiers to cover that whole area. So when the U.S. attacks, they're marching in, and they go into Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, California. They're going into these areas, and they're like, no, there's no one around. Um, excuse me, any Mexican soldiers here? No, nope, none here. So that whole area was taken quite easily. They just went from one place to another to another. Were there skirmishes? Yeah, here and there, but it wasn't much. Okay. Um, now General no, sorry, General Winfield Scott. He's the leader of this mission to go into Mexico and take their capital. So he goes and lands in Veracruz, which is right down here. Okay, so they go and they're in Veracruz. They're marching toward Mexico City. Now, here's something that's really cool. Two future Civil War generals actually meet each other at this particular battle as they're going towards Mexico City. The first one is Robert E. Lee. He is, at that time, the greatest soldier the United States has ever created. This guy graduated from West Point with like a perfect record. Never late, everything was done right, no demerits taken. Basically a perfect soldier. The other guy was Ulysses S. Grant. Now, Grant is kind of the 180 of Lee. He's unorganized, he's dirty, he's always getting in trouble, getting demerits. He's not the best soldier. He's actually kind of like a little below average. But still, he graduates. And they actually meet up. Lee is a scout and Grant's a soldier, and they actually like talk for a bit and stuff like that. Now, that information, hold on to that in the back of your head because that's going to play a role later on in the future. Okay? So, September 1847, the U.S. troops invade Mexico City. That warm-up picture that you saw at the very beginning, that's it. Now, the United States is winning. They're beating back the Mexican army. They're fighting them into the city. And some Mexican soldiers decided that they'd rather kill themselves than be taken prisoners by the U.S. In fact, there's three guys, young guys, who wrapped themselves in the Mexican flag and jumped off this bell tower. And those guys are known in the Mexican culture as Los Niños Héroes, the hero kids. The war ends, the battle ends February 2nd, 1848. The treaty is signed, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and basically Texas is annexed. And Mexico agrees to sell all that land from basically the Rio Grande to where, if you consider that kind of like a green line-ish area, more or less. Um, they sell all that land for $15 million. Okay. Here's the interesting thing. You see where the treaty was signed February 2nd, 1848? Gold is discovered in California at Sutter's Mill on January 24th, 1848. So basically, a little over a week after, or sorry, before the treaty is signed, gold is discovered in California. When that gold was discovered, technically, that was Mexico's gold. So with that in mind, what do you think would have happened if Mexico had discovered all that gold in California a year before the war happened? What do you think would happen? Now, remember I told you there were hardly any soldiers. There were some, but I mean not that much in California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada. Um, so if they had discovered gold a year earlier, do you think that that might have played a role? That would have been that whole taking over those states would have been different. What do you think? Okay, tell me what you think. Write it down. Okay, but we're moving on in three, two, one. And I thought we had an exit ticket, but we don't. So that's it for this, guys. That's it for you guys. All right. So I hope you learned something new. I hope you enjoyed this. Okay, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you later. All right.